Howdy, I'm Brian Wagner from Wagner's Rose Nursery. I'm going to show you how to plant a rose bush, which for me is pretty basic, quite simple. There's nothing difficult or hard about this. So what I've done here, I've already dug a fairly deep hole, and you can see the depth of this hole. It's quite deep. So there's the spade, so you can see how deep I've dug that hole. Now, partly the reason why I've gone a bit deeper is just so that you've got some nice friable soil on the bottom here, and it's not sort of a hard pan, flat, hard surface that the plant's going to sit on. So part of the ground preparation that we've done with this is that when I dug this hole, and you can't really see it now, but we did fill this hole up with water a few days ago. It's drained really well now, and we do have very good soil here that does drain really well, but there's quite a bit of moisture in this ground, right? So it's not going in dry. The plant that we've got here has been soaking in water for 24 hours. I think that's always a good method to get into. It just makes sure that there's plenty of moisture in that plant prior to planting. So what we're going to do now is we're going to pull this plant out of the water. We're going to put it in the hole, and I've mounded that soil a little bit. Let me remove this bucket so we can just get that out of the way. So what I want this plant sitting at about ground level. I'm going to backfill this with soil now, and this is how easy it is. It's just basically drag all the soil back into the hole. And my dog is fascinated by all of this, aren't you, Jess? And I'm going to push that down nice and firm, and that's quite important. You want this plant to be nice and solid. So just push that down. Now that's most probably just sitting a fraction below. It's not a problem. I wouldn't worry about that too much. I'm going to try and get a little bit more soil back in here. And that's really it done. And look, you can see that's really firm in there. That's nice and tight. But why the depth and why I've got it down at ground level is that you know that the root system is nice and deep. And that is really important. I see plants, and this is a rose bush that we've just pruned back, and I'm going to explain this in a sec. But I quite often see roses planted to say that depth, and it is not deep enough. You've only got a little bit of the root system in the ground, and this is where you have problems of plants drying out. And it would be by far our biggest complaint that we get. People just don't plant deep enough, and then they don't water properly. Generally, anything where a plant has died or is dying, it's usually water related, and it gets really frustrating for us, and people just don't water properly. So what I'm going to do now, and you can do it either before you plant or after, but I'm going to cut this plant back quite hard. And I'm not even going to look where I'm cutting this. Now what that has done, it's reduced the canopy. When we put cutting machines through these plants, we sever a huge part of the root system. Some of the roots on these plants can be 2-3 meters long. You might find that hard to believe for a 2-year-old rose bush, but we see it. Every now and again we'll get the odd plant that has a massive root system on it, where it's just running parallel to the surface. So we most probably sever, I'd say 60, 70, 80% of the root system. We do not remove 60, 70, 80% of what's on top. So all of a sudden you've got an imbalance. You've got less root, more top. So for me, the ideal way of doing this is remove a fair bit of the top. So you've got an equal balance, or you've got more root system to what you've got on top. You can see that's fairly even, about the same on bottom on top. And you'll find that this plant will just perform so much better. It will grow so much easier. There's not anywhere near the amount of stress or strain on that plant to keep the top of this alive. We would love to sell all rose bushes at this size. Packaging would be a lot easier. You would get a better success rate. And what you get when you cut them back hard is that you get even growth coming from all over the plant. When you prune them really long or leave them long, you tend to quite often get top growth, and then it's later on in the season you'll start getting sort of shoots around the base of the plant. By doing it this way, you'll just get a nice even growth. You'll get shoots all over this plant. Even if it was just one cane, you're going to get 5, 6, 7, 8 strong shoots breaking off that plant. I would say you're going to get 10 or 15 off of this when it first starts to shoot, and you'll get some shoots around the crown, which are your nice water shoots down the bottom here. So cut it back quite hard. I'd remove at least 50% of what you receive, and then just give it a really good watering. And you might want to water this a couple of times. I'm just going to use a bucket, use a hose, whatever. But this is the really important bit, is water it really well. Give it plenty of water, let that drain. You might want to come back an hour later or half hour later, depending on your soil type. Give it another drink, and that will, you can see that draining already. It's starting to drop quite a bit, and there's a fair bit of moisture in this ground. But I'd come back and give it a couple of waterings and make sure you put a fair bit of water on that plant. Planting, during the winter months, this might be all you need to do. But just keep an eye on the moisture that you're getting. I think quite often people think that we're getting good rainfalls and you might only be getting 1 or 2 mil. And what you could be doing is just watering the very top, or the moisture is just hitting the very top part of your soil, but it's not getting down to the root system. So keep in mind where you are, location in Australia. I know it differs a lot, but just make sure that there's plenty of moisture in that plant, certainly in its early days. So you can see that's drained a fair bit. So I'm going to put some more water back in that. And look, unless you're planting in an area that is just absolutely saturated and it's really, really wet, maybe you don't have to do much of this. But in most conditions, definitely give them really, really good waterings when they first get planted. Howdy, look, I'm going to talk about mulching. I've just gone to get some mulch, and there's a little bit of mulch in this wheelbarrow, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in a sec. But I've only been gone 5 minutes, and look at this hole. It's already drained, and that's already settled a bit. So you most probably want to put a little bit more soil back in there. So I'm going to try and get a little bit more. There's going to be a few little grass clippings on top of this. It won't be a real problem. But anyway, I'm going to put some more water back in here. So you can see what I'm talking about, giving it a really good drink. We now know that by the amount of water I've put on here, that'll be right down into the root system. So we know that the plant's had a really, really good drink. And it settles the plant really well. It'll become nice and solid when that settles. So we'll just give it another minute or so and let that drain, and then I'm going to talk about mulch. As you can see, it's settled a little bit. Now, sometimes I'm never too sure what to say regarding mulch, whether you do it like early season or maybe leave it after spring. I think if you've got really well drained soil, which we have here, then I don't think you've got an issue, right? If you're a bit worried about sort of how much your soil is, moisture content your soil is going to hold over winter time, and if you think it's going to be too heavy or too wet, maybe leave the mulching until, say, springtime when it starts to dry out a little bit. But I'd be very comfortable here to mulch, and we do mulch a fair bit in this property. So what I've got here is some really old bean straw. Now I've got access to a lot of bean straw here. There's a lot of beans growing around here. You can see how woody it is. Now the nice thing about this is that it's really good aeration. Because it's not really, really fibrous, it will take quite a while to break down. So it's just a great mulch. So the type of mulch that I'd be using would be, any legume mulch is great. So bean, pea. Lucerne is regarded as one of the best. We don't really use that because it's quite expensive, but in a small home garden situation, you can go buy a bale from maybe a photo shop, and it is a really, really good mulch to use. So if you can use any of those, but anything is better than nothing. So, so I'm just going to lay this down now, and because it's this time of the year, you'll definitely not get any burning. And I'm just going to explain something about maybe a downside to some of the mulch that you can get. I'm going to put that down, and I'm going to put it on really thick. I'll just move that out a little bit so that can breathe in there, and this will settle down really well. But you can see how I've got it on nice and thick. So really lay it out if you can. And we're going to come back and look at this in another few weeks, 2 or 3 weeks time. I'd expect all of this to have shoots all over it. But that'll be great. Now, what that's going to do, it does a multitude of things. You're getting a lot of organic matter back into the ground. You've just created an environment where you don't have direct sunlight on the surface. Worms will come to the top. Now you've got food for worms. And if you've got food for worms, you've got a really healthy soil. So get your worm population up. Um, the NPK and trace elements in worm castings is unbelievable. It's really, really good for your plants. It creates also aeration. There's worms, organic matter, again going back into the soil. But a worm population is ideal for roses, and you need food for worms. So this is the ideal food for worms. So organic matter, um, pelletized forms of blood and bone, all of that is just ideal for rose growing. As you can see here, that plant looks a little bit low, and this is quite high here. But give it a week or two, and that will actually settle a lot. Um, you could most probably give this a bit of a watering if you wanted to. If it's there's a bit of moisture in this mulch that I've got here, most probably what you're going to get, it'll be a lot drier than this. So you might think, well, maybe I should just give this a bit of a watering to sort of settle the whole mulch. But this will settle down nicely, and it'll look very different in another couple of weeks. Yeah, it's I think we're going to see this plant thriving.